Hello, welcome to the Impersonal Opinion Podcast, the podcast where we don't take our opinions personally. Today we're going to be talking a lot about happiness, and who better to tell us about happiness than the guy who calls himself Blister57, George Ortega. I'll turn it over to him and he can explain.
Okay, thanks, Chandler. And yeah, like just for some background on my my experience with happiness back in the early about 2000s, I researched happiness for about 5 years. I created this television program about happiness that basically just explained the social science research on happiness to viewers. So I've done a lot of research on this, but all right, this is about like Aristotle said, back in 500 BC or so, that everything is a means in life except happiness. Happiness is the only end, meaning that everything we do, the ultimate goal of everything we do, and that I'm saying everything, is about happiness. It's either about our happiness or the happiness of others. And Aristotle, incidentally, also said that happiness is the highest good. In other words, if you're trying to do good for another person or for another animal or whatever, the best thing one can do for another living being, sentient being, is to help that person or being become happier. So, all right, within that context, basically, I've been trying to develop a more effective means of becoming happier. Like here in the United States, like the average level of happiness is like 70%. They ask people, how happy are you on a scale of 1 to 100 or 1 to 10? Basically, most people are about 70% happy. And that's not, I don't think, all that happy. I think we could do much better. And so the problem is that most people believe that happiness is something that comes to us from doing something. In other words, it's a reward for like, working on a goal and succeeding with a goal, or it's a reward for pleasing people. It's a reward for doing various kinds of activities. And certainly happiness does come in that way, but even like according to the research, even the happiest people in the world are happy only about 50% of the time, of each day. There's about 30% of the time when even the happiest people aren't that happy, and about 20% where they're neither happy nor unhappy. So I think even for the happiest people can really, use some help becoming happier. And so like basically, so like, these ways, like, a lot of people are taught, well, get an education, get a good job, earn an income, buy a house, get married, raise a family, do all these things, and you're going to become happy. Unfortunately, most of those things, the vast majority of the things we're told are going to make us happier, have a very, very small effect on our happiness. So you have people like working very hard for happiness all their lives, sometimes delaying it. Sometimes people say, well, when I retire, I'll become happy, or when I finally get this promotion, I'll be happy. And unfortunately, like, for example, with a promotion, somebody's at a job. I mean, let's say they're a lawyer and they want to be promoted to what is that position where they're a partner in the firm or something. So they work on that for 10, 15 years, finally become a partner. One of the things that they've discovered in happiness research is, fine, that person might be happy having become a partner for, let's say, 6 months, a year, maybe a year and a half, whatever. But then there's this thing called the hedonic treadmill that, like, basically they'll get accustomed to their new position, and so their happiness level will pretty much go back to the same level it was before the promotion. It's called the hedonic treadmill. So all right, so we have this problem that, like, these happiness methods are kind of like not very effective. Sometimes they call on us to do a lot of work that isn't really compensated with the happiness. So this is the method that I'm suggesting. It's kind of like going from indirect means of becoming happier to a very direct means. And it also involves a type of meditation called transcendental meditation. Now, there are various kinds of meditation. There's like mindfulness meditation, where you just become aware of your thoughts or your feelings, or try to stay in the present moment. But that's a good kind of meditation. But transcendental meditation actually has the same effects of these other meditations, of relaxing a person, making a person feel better in general. But it also, like, for example, like, lowers blood pressure. It's a more effective type of meditation. And in transcendental meditation, the basic technique is you repeat a sound, or it could be a word or even a phrase, silently over and over, and that's the meditation. Again, meditation is always about focus. So this happiness technique combines the effects, the very positive, very strong effects of this transcendental meditation, with the goal of becoming happier. Okay, so like, several years ago, I experimented with this technique, and what I would do is I would say to myself silently, "I feel completely happy." Okay, now that worked. Like, basically, our minds are like computers. Like, for example, imagine if you were with somebody who was with you 24 hours a day, and that person was telling you all the time, "Oh, you're horrible, you're terrible, you're a terrible person," and stuff. Chances are you wouldn't feel too good about yourself, because this person's telling you this. Well, again, like, if somebody was around you 24 hours a day telling you how great a person you are, chances are you'd feel really good about yourself. So this is the same with happiness. So, like, basically, if one tells oneself, "I feel completely happy," over and over, like, through this meditation, and again, like, you're doing two things. You're both meditating and you're increasing your happiness. Then it seems like a very effective way to very directly become happier. All right, so I was using that for several years, and it does work. It works really well. And hold on, I gotta, like, um, my phone's ringing, and I better not take it. Hold on.
Yeah.
Trish, let me call you back, all right? I'm on a podcast. Oh, sorry. All right. Anyway, so yeah, I should have, like, taken my phone off the hook. Um, so anyway, all right. So, like, now this is about direct happiness. So basically, it's going from, doing things to become happier simply because one wants to become happier. All right. So, like, what I've been working on recently, so in addition, all right, first of all, I've changed the statement, because, like, what happened is, like, when I say to myself, "I feel completely happy," for one, it seems like I'm deceiving myself a bit, because, like, I know I'm not
Yeah.
completely happy.
That's the problem I've had with those kinds of things when I've heard about that is like, well, I don't want to lie to myself, you know?
Exactly, exactly. And the second part is that it felt to me like I was cheating. I would feel guilty. It felt like, this is too easy. I'm not doing any work. There's a part of me that feels that I want to work for my happiness, which I'm not sure is completely correct and all. But anyway, so, like, then recently I switched it over to, what I'm saying now is basically, get happier. That's my mantra. So I'll say it over and over, and so while I'm saying it, and the difference between that and the "I feel completely happy" is, one, I'm not lying to myself, right? And two, it's a command. It's a directive. It's basically telling me that is my work. That is, my work for at least the time that I'm meditating, at least the time that I'm, repeating this mantra. And so, like, that's just one component. So I'm saying to myself, "Get happier." But as I'm doing that, I'm also, you know, consciously, actively trying to summon up that feeling of happiness. Now, I think people can relate to this. In other words, like, if somebody asked us to become angry, we could, I think, tap into that emotion. We could, like, think of things that make us angry, or to become fearful, I think we could think of things that make us afraid. So it's the same thing. So, like, if we ask ourselves to feel, to get in touch with happiness, we can do that. We can get in touch with that emotion. One way to do this is, for example, to remember something in the past, an event that made us really happy, a person, whatever. But all right, so, like, but what I discovered is, like, sometimes while remembering something in the past or imagining something in the the future that's going to make us happier is a good way to evoke or summon up that feeling of happiness. Ideally, that once you've learned how to do that, then the next step is to kind of like learn to just access that feeling of happiness directly without having to remember anything in the past. And we can do that. There was an experiment that showed that most people, like when they were asked, like on their body, what part of their body is most active when they feel happy, and in most people it was actually like the head area, the face, and the upper chest area around the heart and all. So one can focus on these areas if it helps. But so that's this is like a direct means. In other words, like it's a way to train oneself to access one's happiness directly, not having to depend on these indirect means of like of spending time with people. I mean, these things are good, or like working on projects. Again, these things are good. Like being with people is excellent, but a lot of times people aren't available, or sometimes it's just not wise to place one's happiness in the domain of an area of life where one doesn't have complete control. In other words, like, because sometimes people make us happy, sometimes they don't as much, and all. Like, sometimes our work makes us happy, sometimes it doesn't, right? So, all right, so this is the basic technique: accessing one's happiness directly, and then like what one does. The reason people aren't as happy as we could be is because very few people, if anybody actually, because I'm just beginning with this, knows how to access happiness directly at will. So it's training people to like, you want to feel happier, you just simply summon up that feeling. And with the meditation, so what happens is like, so I'm meditating, saying the get happier. And with meditation, again, it's about focus. So I focus on the feeling of happiness, and with meditation, it's about maintaining that focus. So I try to prolong my focus on the feeling of happiness. And then the other component is that as long as I'm focused on feeling happy, then I might as well also focus on trying to feel happier. So I'll try to strengthen that feeling. I think like with anger, sadness, we can feel a little angry, we can feel very angry, we can feel a little sad, we can feel very sad. Same thing with happiness. We can feel a little happy, we can feel very happy. And it's about training ourselves to work, to more easily and more effectively, more efficiently, not just become happy, but become very happy. Okay, guys, I've said a lot. What do
Yeah.
you think of it so far?
Yeah, well, what's interesting, George, what you said about how it's not good to, like have happiness depend, like on being around other people because, those people may not always be available. That's very true. But what you're saying here, George, is actually some new stuff to me because I've heard a lot of stuff, but this sounds pretty new to me. This idea that there's a happiness that somebody could access, like that somehow they could tap into their happiness and intentionally bring emotions to them somehow.
Yes, because I mean, in the happiness literature and in like, for example, my former co-host Lionel Ketchian has this happiness club, and his focus is that happiness is the decision. It's a choice. We either choose to be happy or we choose to be worried or we choose to be saddened. That makes a lot of sense. But the problem with that is that like, all right, let's say I say to myself, all right, I choose to be very happy. It's not going to like work so that like instantly after that I become very happy for every moment of my life after that. So like with all these things, and the other thing about happiness is like I could tell you a lot of ways to become happier, but chances are with most, if not all of them, you already know these things, so it's not like we don't know how to become happier, but we just don't know these things well enough. So like with this, so basically, with this technique of becoming happier, it's kind of like, for example, we can learn, we can read books on how to play piano, how to play piano well. But unless we practice, there's no way we're going to learn how to like actually be a good pianist. So like with this, it's basically just the idea that yeah, we learn this technique, but the second component is to practice it, to practice it, on a daily basis, routinely, to practice the skill of just like being happy simply because, not for any other reason, but because it feels good to be happy. Not because we're achieving any goal, not because we're with people or whatever, just happiness for its own sake.
Yeah, well, George, there's something that I think needs to be clarified because I'm a little confused here. Because you mentioned that guy who was saying that, like, happiness is a choice. We either choose to be happy or not to, which is bizarre because, I mean, since we know we don't have a free will, it seems a little bit, the language of that seems a little confusing to me because I think I'm trying to figure out what someone means by that because obviously everybody would choose to be happy, if it was like a choice. Like,
What do you like?
what, Jamie?
No, that was my brother. Don't worry about it.
Oh, that's Jamie's brother. Yeah. But what I was saying is, like, this idea, if people hear the statement happiness is a choice, well then they might misinterpret that and think that, oh, we can of our free will just choose to magically be happy. So perhaps maybe you could clarify exactly what that means.
Well, absolutely. It's not like we freely choose to feel happy. In other words, like somebody who's attended Lionel Ketchen's meeting in Fairfield, Connecticut, they have the causal history to allow them to make that choice. First, they've heard about it, and then they, like Lionel has maybe explained it to them, and then maybe they understand it. So that, like, their history, their experiences have led them to consider the choice, and hopefully they've been lucky enough to make the choice. For example, if we want to become a vegetarian or a vegan, it's a choice, but it's not really up to us. It's basically like, we've heard some information or learned some information about how we treat animals, and that has caused us to therefore, like, make that choice. So it's not it's not like we're fundamentally, freely choosing to feel very happy, because again, we can't really do that with anything. But colloquially, we're actually, like, we're basically, choosing. The universe is allowing us to choose this, and allowing us to understand the benefit of choosing it, and allowing us to practice this. So that's a good
Right.
point.
And that's what's interesting about it, is that part of the problem why the language of choice gets confusing is because even if it's called a choice in human society to go vegan, for example, well, it was inevitably going to happen given the prior causes that I didn't want to contribute to animal suffering. And similarly, if somebody chooses happiness, then that's because they have the information given to them on how to tap into that happiness, and the fact that everybody wants to be happy already. Everybody wants to be happy. That's kind of the point. So it's sort of confusing because that word choice just really confuses people, because then they think, oh, well, it's just a choice. We'll just choose to be happy, and then what they're doing, George, when they do that, as soon as they conflate it with like a free choice or something, then that means that they don't need your advice on happiness, because then they think they're freely choosing it. So yeah, it's always good for us to clarify that particular thing there.
Right, and actually, Chandler, I mean, so like so like this podcast gets on the internet. Let's say two different people listen to it. One person, kind of like, understands it, appreciates it, sees its value, and then is by that, is kind of like compelled by the universe to choose to exercise it, to develop it. Right. Another person may not be convinced. Another person, because of their past history, their past learning, their past genetics and environment, may not believe it, so they wouldn't. But with that first person, so absolutely, yeah. I mean, because we have to, like, for example, like when we have a deck of cards, pick one out at random, choose one at random. I mean, we use this word choice colloquially, like, in other words, like, if we're at the dinner table, do we want Coke or Pepsi, or what, in other words, we're called upon to make choices all the time. We understand they're not fundamentally up to us, but it's like a necessary convention. So yeah, so absolutely, with this, basically we are, quote unquote, choosing to feel happy moment by moment, instead of like waiting for this happiness to come to us as a result of activities that, a lot of times, again, in more cases than not, they either lead to just a marginal happiness, or sometimes they don't work very well at all.
Right. So I think what we're getting at is that it's something that can be practiced. It's something that can be learned, like playing the piano. That isn't something that just happens randomly, and that it's something that we can work on and that sort of thing. And I think that's what you're getting at is that it's not a passive thing, but an active thing. That there are ways, whether that is through playing the piano or watching a funny movie or transcendental meditation or whatever that might be, that they find the way to cause happiness.
Right. So this is like, most ways are very indirect. Most ways are kind of like, get a promotion, make more money, spend a lot of time, on working on various goals and all. And again, while these methods are effective, based on the research, they're not nearly as effective as they could be. Again, the average level of happiness here in the United States is only 70%. So this is a way to train people to access their happiness in a way that depends on nothing but their wanting to feel happier. We all have the ability to focus on the feeling of happiness. We all have the ability to maintain that focus, and that's what meditation teaches us. We can apply this basic principle of meditation to the practice of, like, once we've accessed this happiness, there's really no good reason to let go of it, because we can do whatever we need to do, feeling happy or not feeling as happy and all. So it's basically teaching humanity, teaching human beings a skill that just has not been taught yet. It hasn't been developed, into this kind of an art, this kind of a practice, so that one's happiness is under one's control, much more so than through the other means.
Right. And as far as in their control, what's interesting about it is because even though fundamentally we understand that we don't control anything, but I think when people talk about this kind of control, what they mean is that that person, independently of other humans, perhaps, they can work on their happiness, and they will not always be looking for other people to make them happy.
Other people or other circumstances, right? I mean, like, the number one, when you ask people, like, what's going to make you happier, the number one answer is more money. However, for most people, like, most people once people are making above a certain income, they can make as much more money as they can, and that money isn't going to influence their happiness, or the influence is going to be so marginal that as to not make a difference. So, like, basically, we have a lot of myths as to what makes us happier, and so people spend a lot of time, waste a lot of time, through education. People think, well, I'm going to be happier as a PhD than I would be as getting a master's degree, and I'm going to be happier with a master's than I would with a bachelor's, and I'm going to be happier with a bachelor's than I would with a high school diploma. And these things are simply not true. People say, I'm going to be happier if I'm more intelligent. No, that doesn't work. So, like, there's so many myths about happiness that they all revolve around, well, if I do this, if I have this, I'm going to be happier. And these, the effects of them are actually very marginal. So this is a way to very effectively, put happiness in our hands in a way that really works. I mean, like, it really is powerful.
Yeah, and what's very interesting about it is, for example, aside from the fact that those things have a very small impact on our happiness, there's also the fact that it's not really up to somebody how much money they make. It's sort of like, my mom, she put an ad in the paper advertising, that she teaches music lessons, but that doesn't mean that she can make those people call her and get started, with lessons. You know what I'm saying? So obviously, if it depends on how much money you make, well, that's a problem, because then that means poor people can't get happiness, and even a poor tailor is entitled to some happiness.
Absolutely. Chandler, that's a great point. Like, a lot of people get married. Getting married people are slightly happier than people who are single. But, like, the divorce rate here in the United States is over 50%. So you can't rely on, like, even married relationships a lot. So yes. So basically, it's it's like taking your happiness away from things you can't control, as you were saying, and bringing them to what you can control, and simply just like wanting to be happy again. Not the happiness is not because we're doing something, because we are something, because we have something. Happiness, because it feels good. What I'm trying to say is, like, a lot of times, like, let's say I published a book a while back, and so I'm saying to myself, all right, I feel happy that I published the book. I feel happy about publishing the book. All right, but again, that's being happy because of something. It's indirect. So, like, we want to switch from feeling happy. I mean, it's not that we can't feel happy for these things also, but like for our strongest happiness, to simply feel happy because it feels good to feel happy. We need no other reason, and that's the most direct way to access our happiness.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. To be happy for the sake of it, rather than it being an indirect effect of other things that we do.
Exactly.
Yeah, and we haven't let Jamie say too much. We've been doing too much of the talking.
Well, a lot of that is to do with the fact that I don't really have much to say on this, to tell you the truth. I've been listening to George Ortega's points. I mean, he was talking about like divorce rates and all that stuff. Them getting married doesn't necessarily make you happy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Jamie, you might want to, once we upload this, you might want to listen to this podcast again, because basically it's a lot of times, like, sometimes we get depressed and all, and certainly sometimes antidepressants work, sometimes cognitive theory works. We can change our thoughts and all, but this is a very effective means of getting better and better and better at becoming happier, simply by summoning up the feeling. I mean, so, like, it's much less complicated than the other kinds of ways that we have, even like through therapy and through medicine, of becoming happier.
Yeah, I suppose trying not to get involved in too many arguments would be a good course of action. Because Chandler told me that he was irritated about names that people have been calling him, and you remember a few months going back, I had this problem myself, didn't I? And I'm thinking, Chandler, you might want to take a break from speaking on these abortion and animal rights issues, because they're not really affected. They're not really helping your mood.
Well, here's the thing, Jamie. Like, let's say with Chandler working on that, and let's say, to the extent we become happier, we can actually engage in these discussions. And if we're telling ourselves, I feel really happy, and if it's working, if we're tapped into that feeling, then all of a sudden, people might call us names, people might not get it, people might say really stupid things and all, but they're not going to affect us, because we're really happy. Have you ever had some kind of a day where, like, you're feeling so good that nothing can get you down? That's the kind of happiness we want to cultivate.
I see. Yeah. I mean, you're able to tolerate these things far more than me and Chandler can. I mean, when people send these things to you, you just don't read the message, do you? I mean,
Right.
this Lee Houston guy, he accused you of encouraging child abuse and all this, rubbish.
Right. I mean, that was the reason, is because, like, I was trying to, like, teach people that, like, even with kids, if we teach them that we don't have a free will, that it's going to be to their benefit and all. So yeah, there's a lot of people who just, like, aren't very intelligent, misconstrue things and all. So, like, with me, like, with those kinds of messages, it's not that I'm any better than you at not allowing them to disturb me sometimes. I just I don't read them, because if I know they may disturb me, why, and this is the same thing with our thoughts in general. If we know that having certain thoughts are going to upset us, why have them? Why not rather choose to just, like, keep our mind focused on happy thoughts?
Yeah, and I think Jamie has a point too, because I probably do need to focus more for a while on the area of happiness and how to tap into my happiness, because I have already done a whole bunch of writing and speaking on the abortion and animal rights issues. But maybe it's time for a little vacation and learn how to access the happiness so that I can come back stronger than ever and do it with a happy attitude.
That
Yeah,
sounds
because
excellent.
Yes.
Yeah, because a while back I was discussing really sensitive issues as well, and that was partly the reason why I've been getting a lot of criticisms, you know. So I don't want to, you know, go back to that, you know, because I just don't like arguments.
Yeah, and you know what, guys, really happiness is pro-life because happy people don't kill themselves. You know what I'm saying?
Excellent. Yes.
Yeah, and we just passed 30 minutes, so perhaps we should end this one, but this has been really awesome about how to tap into happiness, and we'll want to go back and listen to this once I get it uploaded. Okay,
Sounds good.
so did you want to close it, George, or?
Oh yeah, all right. So thanks everybody. So like this has been like Impersonal Opinions with Chandler Klebs, Jamie Soden, and George Ortega. We'll be back with other episodes soon. Thanks.